Hello. It's finally time to do this wacky idea I've had for a while now. It's very simple, but to begin with, the footage for the pre-assembly, like the cutting, chopping and such, it's non-existent. I forgot to press record. I'm pretty dumb. So instead, we're gonna take a look at where the pieces came from and get the general idea. Starting off with, this is the Murasame Liger, and like the other two ones to come, this is from Zoid's Genesis, which I still haven't seen yet. Though from what I understand, the main protagonist is the pilot of this one, and basically they evolve and devolve like Digimon. Well, this one does, specifically. I can't speak to the other Zoids in the series because I haven't seen it. So for this build, the pieces from the head are particularly key from the Murasame, being parts of the cheeks, the cheek armor, the visor, and I think you'd call that the mane, I guess. Also with the front shoulder armor being key for the Kitbash. I did try to adapt the waist rail with the backslide from the Murasame, but it didn't really work, so I settled on a modified version of the regular waist armor that's found on both the Hyate and Mugen Ligers. And next up is the McDonald's product placement called the Hyate Liger, being the second form of the base Liger. I guess the second stage evolution, similar to a Pokemon maybe, but you know, these devolve, so whatever. Anyway, it lost its back-mounted swivel sword in favor of two ankle-mounted blades, and they look really damn decent. These are, in fact, the blades that our custom is going to feature on all four legs, so that means the ankle armor where they attach is needed times 4, and 4 blades total. We're going to need 2 Hyate kits to achieve this, and we're going to need to cut the circular piece that they actually physically slot onto, and glue it onto the rear armor. Looking at his head, you'll see the sections of his crest, cheeks, and even the ear vent things that have been yoinked for the mashup, along with, again, some of the mane. Finally, his leg armor. In particular, the rear shoulder and both the front and rear thigh pieces were also yoinked, along with some of the shin armor for the front. And that's about it for him. I guess he's not too bad, you know, all things considered for being a McHappy Meal toy. Continuing on, we land on the third and best Genesis Liger, being the third form, with of course no bias because it's just simply the best and you can't dispute that. Sorry. I'm kidding. You're allowed to dislike it. Anyway, taking a look at the head, we can see the sections of the main crest that will be used for the project, along with the neck mane area below under his jaw. A quick peek at the back and you'll notice that the tail is being used on my one, 1-to-1, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The tail already looks fantastic. Lastly, we've got the back-mounted blade system, which is being yoinked almost 1-to-1, with the exception of 2 blades matching being the smaller option. And that means that you need 2 Mugen Liger kits to do this build. And before we get, the paws are also required with their armor, as is, with pieces from the Hyate's paws being added. So with those 3 being introduced, now we throw them into a blender and see what monstrosity is going to come out the other side before the paint is added. The overall assembly for this idea is fairly easy. It just took a whole lot of staring and thinking, fitting, removing, and dummy placement to see what looked good and what didn't really. The hardest part was actually locking in and figuring out what I personally liked the idea of before actually locking, you know, that piece in. And that swallowed most of my build time, to be honest. Just sitting there and staring and deciding whether or not I did indeed like it. As you can see though, what we have here is effectively a clown suit mashup that basically shows what the general idea is, and I think it's going to come out pretty cool. The next steps from here, as you might imagine, are disassembling the prototype and tidying up some bits where it's needed before the color separation is done. That's basically the easiest part of this whole thing, since building what you've just seen already required tidying up most of, if not all of the pieces, as did the cutting and chopping, the filling, sanding, and readying to make sure that it would fit and work as desired. Now on to the color scheme, which is heavily based on my personal choice Saber Tiger, the one that I did with chrome armor a while ago, and the differences here are the textured frame and legs instead of steel are going to be SMS Surfacer Black with obsidian over the top, so it has a texture, as I mentioned, and I think that'll just look neat. For the main armor and the secondary armor, we're going with purple and amethyst, and they're going to be complemented by steel and super silver accents, with the final touches of a hand-mixed gold, along with a color shift that I mixed, using SMS paints as the base, which is why 2 of the bottles are turned away. I smashed out all of the painting in a single session, and it was pretty easy to do because I was super keen and had enough time. I really wanted to see how it turned out. Basically, I started with all of the textured pieces first. So this was the body, the legs, and all of the miscellaneous pieces such as like where the blades on the legs are held. And as previously mentioned, that's SMS Surfacer Black with obsidian over the top. In particular, the Surfacer is really good for sanding before moving on because it has a talc-based fill that if you leave it untouched, it gives you the texture that I'm looking for. And the idea for the color on the pieces was very simple, just I wanted it to look dark and perhaps some sort of cast. Really rough cast though. Up next, I smashed out the Amethyst secondary armor pieces, and unlike the Snow Fox that I did quite a while ago now, I generously applied the color of a chassis black here, so that it was brighter and lighter to suit the primary armor pieces that would be found alongside it, and hopefully will be darker. Those particular primary pieces weren't too different, either being primed in chassis black also, and that was before the Pearl Purple Grape was sprayed over the top and built up into the vibrant finish that you're going to see at the end. At this point, we all knew that SMS steel was coming. It always does. I sneak it into every build where possible. It's my absolute favourite metallic by them. Though this time it was simply used for the claws, blades, belly cannon, visor, and lower chest wrap armor. And that was all again over chassis black. Once I was done with the steel pieces, I moved on to taping up the primary blades and readying a bunch of the other secondary blades to be hit with some more chassis before Super Silver was neatly layered on, with the idea of it being a bit like the armor, a primary and secondary set of silvers to complement. Continuing the train of metallics was the custom gold I mixed, and basically the idea was pretty basic. 35% old gold, 35% red gold, and 30% red clear, because I was curious how it would look, and to be honest, I really dig it. Also over the top of chassis black. Finally done was the color shift caps, and that again was a mix of SMS color shifts, being Abyss, Eclipse, and Void. And if you're asking why these three in particular, it's because I had low amounts and 3 bottles and figured let's send it and see how it turns out. Though, turned out pretty bloody nice if you ask me. Leaving all of the pieces to settle for a day before assembling, I dug in and knocked out all of the rebuild pretty quickly, and I tossed up a few times adding decals, but ultimately I liked the simple smooth look, and left it for a future knife cap build, especially considering I've got 4 other frames that I can play with and lots of armor to muck around with. The rebuild was pretty smooth, though considering it was parts of all 3, a lot of it was down to just remembering what went where, aside from the legs, which I could use instructions on, so that was pretty okay. Finishing up the build, I hard fixed the tail end because the Genesis laggers usually drop the tails over time, which is very annoying, so I recommend that you do that too, if you ever do them. And now it's time to take a bit of a gander at the finished fella. It turned out decent, with a lot of the pre-paint gouges and kit errors, such as the incorrectly injected visor, adding to the character I feel, with the paint job blooming nicely for what I wanted. Where I could have just simply sanded and filled anything back that I wasn't happy about, I kinda like the idea that it's got these gouges and these scratches and these little imperfections from combat. With all of the extra armaments and pieces around its legs, the general idea is that it has a lot of air and particle intake for extra cooling, speed bursts, and a little bit of OP CPC diffusing, but don't read too deep into that. I don't actually know much about the science of Zoids, so it's just headcanon. That being said, with blades like these, imagine this intimidating silhouette charging you. I'm more than sure it'd be pretty unnerving with how many blades it wields, is shielded by, and can flick about in its defense. Like, just look at that over-the-top deployment. It's enough to make a 40k orc proud with all that melee dakka. And the best part is, being a fan of melee stuff in general, I guess I've made my first true custom here. And with that, I guess that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed that, so until the next one, happy modeling and take care.